We need to be as fearless as the women whose stories you have applauded.
I believe that there is no difference between a man and a woman.
There is a vision for my life that is greater than my imagination can hold.
And equal rights for women in the United States of America.
NGW Radio Hour. Talks, ideas, edutainment. Adapted for radio. A movement. Not just a program for new generation women.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners. I'm back in Munich and I flew in for this upcoming interview, just for this interview to Majorca. The day before I flew in, I thought I must be kidding. I'm sitting in the middle of a bunch of young drunk men. I come late. Renting a car was a nuisance. I had a beautiful finca in the middle of Majorca, but I didn't find my finca. So if you know Majorca, if you have been in the middle of it and not at the ocean, you know it's really hard to find. I found finally a woman and she would say to me, oh, it's difficult to find. And I thought like, oh gosh, I'm going to sleep in the car. I have nothing to eat. I'm hungry. This was so not worth it. And then I found finally a man drove by and I almost jumped in front of a car. It was nighttime. Can you please bring me? Can you please give me some hint? I don't find it. So he drove me there, which was awesome. The next morning was a little bit more peaceful. When you know Majorca, the beauty of the light, the spirit, nature is just breathtaking. And I knew again, yeah, I think it was worth it. And it was worth it. The afternoon with my upcoming interview guest was just heartwarming, gentle, humorous, inspiring. I'm still touched. I'm still very touched by this interview. And I tell you who it is. My interview guest is an internationally renowned spiritual teacher, David Hoffmeister. He's a teacher, a spiritual teacher of A Course in Miracles, a modern mystic, a non-dual teacher of oneness, and an author. His latest book is This Moment is Your Miracle. I then asked David, do you know what we're talking about? And he said, nope. I said, okay, great. He said, well, something with men who give hope. I said, yeah, we go there, we come there. So what we're talking about is we're talking about modern female leadership and awakening women in romantic relationships. And I titled it with Jeanne d'Arc and Pretty Women Are Dead. What now? I find it extremely funny, but David didn't, maybe because he thought, what am I going to do here? And but we touch really interesting points, the answers on questions such as what is the opportunity for awakening women in taking on leadership roles or for awakening women in relationships? What does an inner-led approach to leadership and relationship mean for us? And how can we come back to our center when we feel distracted or lost again in our environment and we feel pulled back in an old way of thinking? So why did I choose a man? You're asking, Jeanine, this is female empowerment, 40 plus women. I said, yeah, but we are always talking with each other. We are nurturing and supporting each other already so much more than 10 or 20 years ago. So there's a whole new wave of women coming together and exploring and supporting and building communities. So that's awesome. And I always said, maybe because I was single for 7.5 years after my divorce, and it was not about finding a man. It was finding and being with a conscious man who would be committed to consciousness, but not just saying it, really doing his inner work. And I didn't find it for a long time. So that was quite hurtful. And I was always afraid, oh no, I don't want to be alone again. All that searching for a conscious man who's really committed. So this is why I said, why don't we talk with conscious men who give hope to see they're out there. There is coming a balance. The millennials are out there. Men are starting to hurt as much, so they're seeking for different opportunities in having a more work-life balance. And they feel that their wives or their marriages just also lose some kind of dynamic because very often the women go forward. They want to expand again, mainly when they're in their 50s, in their late 40s. There's something that pulls them forward to expand and not stay there and get stuck there. And I think they get it. And this makes some men go their way along with us, which is, I think, beautiful. We cannot do it without men, actually. That's what I think. We need, of course, the inner marriage but then, of course, the outer tandem and partnerships. So my first question to David was, I said, David, well, you're a spiritual teacher yourself. You're leading communities. You are leading people from all walks of lives and countries, and you help them, which is the foundation of A Course in Miracles, to shift their perception from fear to love. And I asked him, is this what a good leader is about? To encourage people from fear to true potential, to empower them to go out of their fearful mind and thinking into true potential, into their love. And this is what he said.
Yeah, I do feel that is the purpose of leadership. And I have kind of an interesting view on leadership because I'm so much like yourself, I think, into the intuition. And I do feel that the intuition is vital to everything on the planet and everything involving success and spiritual awakening and anything you can really name. And I've always told people for many years, probably for 20-some years, that to be a good leader, you have to be inner-directed or inner-led so that you can let that spirit, that wisdom kind of lead through you. And it doesn't have any kind of sense of superiority, inferiority with it. It's really about equality, and it's about clarity, and people just resonate with it when you're led by the Spirit, and then you seem to be in a leader position because you're so turned over to the Spirit, to the intuition.
That's very interesting. I did some leading projects myself, and I was raised in a business environment. Not that I wanted to be there, but it just happened that I was there. Mm-hmm. So my whole upbringing was, I'm more the creative type, but in the business world I need to be very analytical, very structured, and very rational, which was really hard for me to go there that way. And if I would name intuition or ask other women, let your intuition speak to you, they would say, I'm not talking to my executive and say this. This is absolutely no-go. And I was raised having two lives. One was my spiritual life, my conscious path, and one was being in the working world where I had to be a total different person. So how can female leaders, I mean, there are so little female leaders still in politics and in the economy, and even in spirituality, you have still more male or men leading and not women. Why is it this way? Why are still so many women or so little women in front? And what is the blockage for them and for men?
Well, I think it's probably the blockage is a sense of underlying fear where there's still aspects of control and very strange dynamics that come across when that's still at the core of society, a lot of societal customs and norms and mores, and I think that's why, you can look around the world and you can see, like with Iceland, the first female leader over there set the tone for a lot of other countries to come. But it's almost like it's breaking through into consciousness, but there's the layer of fear, the veil of fear is very thick. And I think you find that where the veil is not thick, where it's become very thin, then you do see much more of the symbol of female leadership. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, in my community, where I'm looked on as like a demonstration and so on and so forth, I actually have basically a majority of females in the community, and in terms of leadership positions, actually running the day-to-day underworkings and underpinnings of everything. There's a woman, and then there's a group of 4 women and a man, and this group is called the ninjas because they have to be so precise with their decision making.
They're very precise.
Yes.
The way how they asked me, I was like, whoa, I thought it's already done, and then came another question. I was like, whoa. And I'm brought up in the business world, so that was, yes, it's a good ninja, yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I think it's just almost natural, whereby, when I was in university, and I took a women's study course when I was in graduate school, and we talked about androgyny, we talked about these great traits that were actually really neither male nor female, but that the androgynous one could draw on whatever traits were necessary in the moment for the greater good of the whole. And to me, I like that. I related to that. I said, oh, that sounds like something I can relate with. And then when you get into spirituality, it's the same thing. In religions, there's so many connotations of masculine and feminine, and masculine traits and feminine traits, but I feel like what serves the whole, what serves the greater good is what I've always wanted to tap into. And then I feel like when we do tap into that, it's a blessing. It just ripples out blessings for everyone and everything. And to me, that's just been my focus all these years.
Now, we're lucky to have men like you. And the reality is that there are not so many men yet like you, where women would love that. Dalai Lama said Western women are changing the world. And this is always a quote I'm saying in the world where still a lot of that's still male dominated. I mean, everybody knows we need more women in female leadership, because there is a natural intuition with women. There is seeing a bigger picture. There is a natural emotional and social natural intelligence if they're not brought up totally like males. But then if you come to reality, and when I started female empowerment, they said, it's not that women are weak. I said, no, it's not because they're weaker. It's because they do have a natural spin of moving stuff forward. And in relationships, there's this natural push. I had it. I would just drag along my ex-husband. I would now drag along my partner. I was like, I don't want to drag along men all the time again, because it is kind of adventure for me too, and not the easiest always. But then when we are in an economy world, or in politics, or also in education, you still have so many men, and they say, yes, we want to have more women, but then they still have not found the solution how and why. And I always say for a female leader, it takes a conscious male leader. It doesn't, it needs to be a tandem. And women say, we want to come forward. So men still today say to me, very conscious young men also, oh, Jeanine, why we don't find any women as speakers. We don't find them for talk shows. We don't find them for leadership. Where are they? Where are the good women? Are they just stuck with their children at home? Do they go backwards? And I say, no, they want to move forward, but when they have executives or environment or frame where the layer is not as thin as you just said, or the veil is not getting thinner, you still have a mindset that unconsciously, very often also, prevents it. What is necessary, business women or women in education and mothers also in parenting, when they want to lead their qualities forward and they want to take on leadership roles for their children, families, communities, businesses, teams, what is important to move forward? Also in cooperation with men, what can they do? They feel often very powerless.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to really be clear on the purpose. Like when you think of leadership, what is the purpose of it? How will this serve me? And teaching from A Course in Miracles is basically you teach what you would learn, and everyone is teaching and learning, and teaching and learning, and therefore even leadership is a quality, is like a mechanism in the mind for expansion, for expanding your awareness, for expanding your consciousness. It's different to go toward leadership with that in mind, like, wow, this can expand my horizons, this can help me reach my full potential and actualize what I can really be. And then the other motive would be to look towards the world and try to make a change in the world, which is still, I would say, a little veering off from that, how can this be a blessing for the whole? Because oftentimes when we try to change the political structures and change the environment and change the ratios of leadership and so on and so forth, the reason I think it's so frustrating is, in a very subtle way, we're still looking outside of ourselves for the change. And I do feel that if we start to see leadership as, oh, this is my opportunity to teach what I would learn, and also I would say to think of leadership and teaching also based on our thinking, because a lot of times there's so much focus on action and behavior, but we're teaching ourselves, and I say we're teaching the whole universe with our thoughts, And we need to learn to build our confidence and come into more alignment with spirit, with love, with peace, with joy. And then as we teach and lead from that perspective, then we actually strengthen our awareness of those qualities. And we start to feel, oh my gosh, this is who I am. So for me, when I came across the Course, I also watched a lot of videos, and I saw people that were in politics and all different societal things, from biologists to chemists, scientists, and working in social services. And then when they came to start to work on spiritual awakening, they started to realize that their focus on trying to change the world was actually dissipating their energies, and that when they could come to change their perspective on the world, to change their outlook, and really change their thoughts about the world, then they were making a huge impact through becoming, I call it like self-aware, in the truest sense, like self-actualization, like Abraham Maslow reaching the top of the pyramid. So to me, it's the motive that you go toward the leadership. It's like the purpose underneath. What is the purpose of my striving in terms of leadership? And that's where the clarity comes in, and I think that makes all the difference.
I'm doing some notes because I want to all weave it together. And you said something that is very important. So let's make it just practical in where I am and my, my whole consciousness. And from my consciousness, of course, see other women who have the same question marks. So it absolutely makes sense to have an inner light, to go by intuition, to have your spirit. You can also have other names, your heart or nature or whatever you want to call it, the guidance within that leads you. And that comes within, and you're not so obsessed by the form. So here I come, and makes total sense. And then I am maybe in the middle of a business world, or maybe I want to, I've been a mother and my kids are grown and I want to set up my own business. And then I hear all different people talking how difficult it's here, or this executive isn't supporting that. So you are telling me, instead of focusing on the form and focusing what's happening outside, and everything that seems to be difficult, that the ego will confirm that's difficult, start to go by within, to find your own purpose, what's the purpose of your leadership, and let yourself be led by within. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
Okay, so now I think I do have a strong intuition. That doesn't mean I always have a strong intuition. I think we all have a strong intuition, but acting on it when, there's so much coming on. How can females who have by nature such a wonderful, beautiful intuition connect back with their intuition when they're in the middle of kids crying, having deadlines, having money problems, or having a boss shouting at them, or maybe even if it's not as challenging, but they feel, what now? It makes sense to me, but the gap between here and now seems to be so big. Even if you tell us the journey without distance, what can we do now?
Yeah, well, it does seem to be that's when there's a lot of external stimulation and things that are distracting, and there's a high, fast-paced movement and everything. It is the most difficult time, because that is the time for faith. That is the time that you need a lot of reminders about please, I have to remind myself what this is all really for, because without that, it's easy to get lost and taken away by the distractions, or just to feel frustrated and overwhelmed and almost feel like you just want to cave in. And once you start to get that feeling, then it's almost like you'll try to break away, shut down, pull away. There's defense mechanisms that will kick in, and those aren't going to bring about any happiness, any lasting happiness or openness and awareness. So for me, that's the most difficult time. I know from my own experiences, when I was in those situations, I felt like I really had to, before I would go into my 7-hour workday, I was praying, I was meditating, I was aligning my mind, I was using my drive in my moments. I'd sit in the car even before I would go in, because there was certain situations where I felt like I was just sucked in at the beginning of the workday, and then I was just spit out at the end. It was so full on, and even my bathroom breaks. I mean, I was so conscious. Even around lunchtime, I had a brown bag, but I would sit there and I would oftentimes meditate instead of just getting caught up into like the political discussions or discussions about the everyday things. I just felt like I really had to use whatever time during the day that I could as my like oasis or my reminder points, and that actually had bared a lot of fruits, because I was able to steady myself, go on sometimes for another 2 or 3 hours, and then come to another point where it was like a focal point, and then make it through the day. And this world is really filled with distractions that try to draw the mind away from the center. And I feel like that's where tapping into the intuition is to say, no, come back to center, practice that, even in the midst of a busy day. Even the pathway I took, A Course in Miracles, has 365 lessons, but it can be applied anywhere, at any time, at any place. So it's very flexible that way. Some spiritual practices, there's a lot more control of the environment required, but not with the Course. So that actually helped me. I was in my work too, to help me concentrate, coming back to my lesson of the day.
Yeah, thank you so much. That because it feels like sometimes you do baby step, and I can be, try to get it, and then I really can get obsessed, and I try to get the Course, and then I don't get it, and I smash it against the wall, and next day I come humbly back to the Course and pick it up again. But what really helped me, saying in my mind, one loving moment at a time, that calmed my mind. And I did, and also for other women, and I'm also giving this further as a coach, I always say, have your spiritual routine and start with 5 minutes a day, and now I do 2 hours, and it was completely not possible. I even couldn't do a whole straight prayer, being distracted from my mind. So doing 2 hours of spiritual routine every day takes still my discipline. And still some days I think, today you take a day off. But that day off is not really, I miss it. Then I think, I miss it. It's not my day off then really. So I could see how beautiful a spiritual routine is, as you say, to remind yourself, to keep yourself from the distractions of the world and build that strength within. Now here's a typical situation. I hope that's okay. I love always to give examples in my state of consciousness, and it should also be part of the relationship part. So here's a typical situation. There is, my partner is semi-conscious, or he wants to, and then I think he doesn't do his inner work. So I do everything to do my inner work. So here we have a situation. I get then frustrated because he looks all kind of political talk shows, reads the news. He just knows everything, all in the out. And I get very grouchy and manipulate and blame and say, can you not just do your inner work? I mean, your meditation, you were so calm yesterday when you did your meditation. So, I maybe for a day I don't say anything, for a week I don't say anything, but then my gun comes out in the second week, and can you not do this? So typical blame and manipulation. And then I do my inner work, and then he sits in the car, and there is an argument, and it's about politics and stuff, and he says, well, I wish you would be just more interested in politics. And then, I would give him all the superwoman stuff. And I said, what does it help you? Are you feeling any kind of more, relief that you know everything about politics? And then the spiral goes, I will end in a minute, and then the spiral goes down, and he comes with this, well, if people, you have to be informed what's happening, Jeanine. If people would have known, Germany would not have had that mess in World War II. So that's the bottom. Now we hit bottom. And then the discussion, I then choose to leave the discussion. But of course, people say, how can you just be a leader inside? Don't you want to be informed? Don't you want to know? Don't you want to... and if I try to get involved too much on the outside, it feels like I'm torn. On one hand, I see what is happening in the environment, so I feel I would like to be responsible. On the other hand, I see also what's happening in politics. I like to be responsible. And then, as what you say, I need so much time to keep myself from being distracted so much from the outside world. Mm-hmm. So my spiritual routine and my work takes so much time that I even wouldn't know how to do this in community. And what I decided for myself, and I'm very happy to hear after this your perspective, I said, okay, one loving moment at a time. If you do a project with a business, then do something where people take care of water, paper, and plastic, and they sign up for it. So there's a ripple effect on that. Or let's take on a young woman who doesn't have the background to be an intern, and she's an outcast, but let's take in the outcast. So I try to integrate those elements into my projects, that at least I feel I do something what I'm seeing. But still I do feel powerless at times. I'm still feeling torn. Should I do more on the outside? Is it really enough what I'm doing here as a leader?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good question, because I think the question is really getting at a core topic, which is like what is this perspective of what is helpful for the whole, and how can we start to come more rapidly into that awareness of what that is. You know, for some, they may say, well, what does that even mean? In a world of such duality and such conflict and such compromise, what is for the whole, can sound a little bit like airy-fairy, and doesn't seem so practical. When my intuition started working with me, it was always using movies and examples from history and from the world, very practical. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really struck me was Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi. My heart just lit up when I watched the movie Gandhi, Richard Attenborough's movie. And one thing that really got me was, at one point in Gandhi's life, some reporter said, Mr. Gandhi, are you a saint trying to become a politician? Mm-hmm. And Gandhi stopped him and said, oh, no, it's the opposite. Mm-hmm. I'm a politician trying to become a saint.
Oh, wow.
And that just hit me like a ton of bricks, because I admired him so much. And then I read his autobiography, because I was fascinated, like, what did he really mean that he's a politician trying to become a saint? Because I knew he was very concerned about, freeing the Indian people and getting the British out of India and walking to the shores, the beach to make salt, and always doing these things that would bring attention of the need for freedom. But then the more I read his autobiography, I thought, wow, he's going for an inner freedom, because he spent so many years in prison, and he actually learned how to be quite happy and content, like Nelson Mandela and a number of others. They actually seemed to expand their consciousness while they were in prison, not in society, not in politics. And so also it called me to start to expand my horizons, because we're used to what we read, the family we grew up with, the culture. It's almost like we're in a puddle, we're in a pool of concepts, and we struggle to find a balance sometimes between the inner and the outer, and doing something that feels rich and meaningful inside, and yet also seems to make a difference. And those discussions you have with your partner, about being informed versus the inner work. Well, I was aware that Gandhi seemed to be very well informed, and yet he said he was a politician trying to become a saint. So then that was an invitation more to go into the deep spiritual traditions of India. And that got me more into the Vedas, and got me into a lot of the deeper teachings. And I would have to say, after years of searching through these Indian teachings as well as philosophies and spiritualities all over the world, that I would just classify them as you have dualistic pathways and you have non-dualistic pathways. And the deepest are the pathways of non-dualism, of oneness. And for all of us, there's something that resonates about oneness, about unified perception, unified awareness. Even when we get into a relationship, or we have a partner, or even when we get married, the goal is union, the goal is connectedness, the goal is love, the goal is feeling that love. And what I started to realize was, as I went into these deep traditions, I thought, these non-dual traditions, there's not many of them, but something is resonating in my heart. But the more I went into them and I started studying the saints and the mystics, I started to see that that's where Gandhi's quote came in, that he grew up in the Paramahansa Yogananda, he met Ramana Maharshi. He grew up in the tradition of India, of these huge spiritual masters, Nim Kurli Baba, on, and they were so spectacular, and they reached such high states of mind, and I would say transcendent states of awareness, that they would see the world as lila, like as a play. They weren't, these masters didn't seem to be struggling with this inner-outer question. In fact, for them, the outer seemed to be the inner. Like you had Richard Alpert, who became known as Ram Dass, going over to India and thinking he's a psychology professor and very highly educated, and then going over to India and having this guru absolutely read his mind, saying, "Oh, you were just thinking of your mom last night when you were looking at the stars." One line like that from the guru, it just struck him like, oh my God, he's reading my mind. I was looking at the stars thinking about my mother last night, and this guy's babbling on, talking to me as if he can read every single thought in my mind. For a trained psychologist in the Western world, that's mind-blowing. And there's, of course, the famous story where, he also said, bring your little case, and he had all these LSD pills, lots and lots of them, and then the guru said, bring them, open it up, and he was so embarrassed, and then opens them up, and then no more, and a pile full of the most powerful LSD pills. The guru takes them all in the hand, swallows the whole thing, and continues on with no reaction whatsoever, as Ram Dass is in utter amazement.
Yes, Guru did this too in front of the audience. Yes, I remember that he did that.
Yes, and so what it does is it starts to point us towards, like Maslow said, the self-actualization. What's the highest realm?
Yes. Because
wouldn't it be the highest realm of our awareness, or the top of our consciousness, that would be the way shower, that would... That's why we look to Jesus, we look to Buddha, that's why we look to the saints and the mystics and the St. Francis's and Mother Teresa's, because they're showing us the higher nature of what we're all capable of. So as I got deeper into that, I started to realize that spirituality wasn't some kind of casual thing that could be part of my life as a personality, but that I could actually devote my entire efforts and my entire devotion to that awakening. Trusting, of course, that everything else would be taken care of. For example, with the book The Secret, or with the Law of Attraction, there are many, many, many teachers. That's actually a little more popular than pure non-duality, because so many people relate to it.
It's commercial.
Yeah, it's commercial, but also people are hurting. They're lacking, they're hurting, and they want things, and they need to be convinced that there's something more. So even that manifesting phase, and even that kind of law of attraction phase, it does serve just as a confidence booster that I can do this from the inside. Inner direction can solve all my problems, even the financial ones, even the ones that I believe are political or that are environmental, that the power of our spirit is so strong that if we give ourselves fully to it, it brings that unified perception again. And what is that except starting to see that the inner world and the outer world are the same? And that's what I think the workbook of A Course in Miracles is attempting. Nothing I see means anything. It starts off with talking about our perception is not meaningful, then it starts to go into our thoughts, then it starts to make a connection between our thoughts and what we perceive, and eventually it's going to show us that we are whole, we are unified, and we can be happy in that sense of unity. So to me, that's what's so practical about this. I actually see the value, and I finally could understand what Gandhi was saying, whereas he still he still was dealing with some political beliefs. He was still dealing at the realm of duality, and that's when, I remember telling somebody one time, Gandhi, he was a lawyer, Cambridge education in England and everything, but one time he got sick on the boat between England and India, and somebody asked me one time, why did Gandhi get sick? Was it motion sickness? Was he seasick? And I said, no, he took a side in the World War. And what? He was sick because he took a side? I said, yeah, he took a side for the Allies against the Axis. And that's what sickness is. It's taking a side in your mind. That's what all politics is. There would be no politics without side-taking. And unified awareness, which is what forgiveness is all about, shows us that it's all our mind and that there are no sides. So people are fascinated with the idea that sickness has to do with taking the side. You mean to tell me taking the side against Hitler was actually sick? And it's like taking any side is going to bring about a conflict in the mind because you're for and against.
Yes.
And you can't see the Christ, you can't see the Atman, you can't see the oneness there. When you take a side, you obscure it.
Yes.
So it runs very deep, but for me, I've just said, I'm seeing how practical this spiritual awakening is, and that just gave me more impetus to really go for it.
I have made so many notes, I have to use the second page of my notebook. I was like, I have to question. I'm all over the place. I've got tons of questions, what you said, and I didn't lose it. I just found my way again, because you also mentioned Invictus with Nelson Mandela. Yeah. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. It is so, I love it. I love the end. The end. And everybody who hasn't seen the film yet, it is so good. And also, I love your library. David has a library, a commenting film library that you can rent it, or you can have a membership for a year, which is a small amount of money for all the work you did. And we just go by your movies. I mean, if my partner and I want to see a movie, I said, oh, let's look what David has in store. So my partner is already so jealous. He always said, don't you want to look what David is saying to this, or what David has in store in this? So I always pick the trailers and say, look at this. And then I don't say David. I said, is this a David movie again? So he always has to listen to your comments, and I say, did you hear this? Did you hear this? So but we do love your library. So I can highly, highly recommend it to everybody, because I do think that movies bring things much easier to your awareness in a playful, humorous, and an emotional way. Yeah. And that film really struck me. I was really very taken also by Forrest Gump, this in the moment, being in the moment. He just let himself, because his brain was not functioning, and that was his gift, because he could be just more easily led by his intuition. He didn't overthink it so much. So taking the image and the metaphor of Nelson Mandela being in prison, and also Eckhart Tolle seems to work with some prisoners, saying you can accept that moment, you can in that moment. So when we talk, coming back to female leaders who really resonate with what you're saying, they do have a boss that is, they would say, yes, David, but my boss is really not even close to consciousness. I mean, we are far, far away in our whole company. But I do want to be a leader. I do feel a calling. So what am I doing now? So is that like a kind of too harsh metaphor if I say, look at Nelson Mandela. He worked himself in his cell. And then at some point, today it doesn't need 30 years anymore, I hope. But at some point it spiraled him out. And from there, at one point, he had a whole nation. So yes, he was in a prison. And yes, you would say there is no freedom. But maybe if we feel in prison, in our relationship or in our business or in our self-employment, that we start within, that we start from that tiny spot, and then from there we don't know what the form will take. Is this kind of the metaphor that you were talking about?
Yeah. I would say that whatever we perceive, if we're working in a company or an institution where there seems to be like a glass ceiling, or there seems to be a lot of stratification in the leadership of whatever, it's a law firm or a medical practice or dentistry or whatever, you can watch your emotions, and if you find yourself reacting and you find yourself thinking, well, that's arrogant, or well, that's controlling, or that's manipulative, or whatever, we can start to realize that the way we're feeling is coming from our thoughts, and that we can use any situation to get aware. What's triggering me? How am I feeling? Really pay attention. How am I feeling? Give it a full attention. How am I feeling? And then start to realize that really it's the thoughts about the situation, about the person or whatever, that's upsetting me. So we're not directly, that's part of that old teaching, you make me mad, you make me sad, you hurt my feelings. As children and all the way up in adulthood, we grow up with this idea that there's external people and situations that are pushing our buttons, when actually it's our thoughts that are pushing our buttons. And the more we're aware of our thoughts, then we can actually start to thank these images and these triggers. I was thinking of a song, thank you for your most, Alanis Morissette, thank you for your most generous triggers, is one of the lines in her songs. The whole song is about empowerment, and you can start to actually come to a gratitude, to start to realize that the people in your life aren't really there to hold you back, but they're there to reflect what's going on in your awareness. Then you can change your thoughts. And then when you change your thoughts, the world that you see will change significantly. So that's important too, because sometimes people feel like trapped in jobs, trapped in careers, but spiritual awakening is about going through this purification and then coming to start to see that I am not at the mercy of my company, I am not at the mercy of my boss, I am not at the mercy of my culture or the society. I have the power in my mind, the God-given power to know who I am and to allow my thoughts to be purified, and then I will see a world that reflects that purification. So to me, that was the most important thing, because when I first started doing the course years ago, it took me about 2.5, 3 years, and then all of a sudden the voice of Jesus was in me, around me, all over. And I would continue on with my thoughts I rant on about society and competition and all the things I was upset with the world. And then everything I would pick, I would say, well, I don't like society. Society is warped, it's distorted. He would say, but you think you're in society, society is in you. And you don't like these politicians and you don't like these politics, but you think you're in them, but they're in you. He was starting to train me to a very empowered perspective, to see that the world I see is a reflection of my thoughts and concepts. And I'm not at the mercy of the world, I'm at the mercy of these egoic concepts and beliefs that are projecting the world. And he was working with me on seeing that exactly as it is, and then being willing to make the turnaround. Kind of like Byron Katie, and talk about leadership. She's spectacular. That's the same work I've been doing for years. Turn it around, turn it around. That's what the Course is. That's what the work from Byron Katie is. Eckhart's talking about that constantly. And it's so valuable when you start to realize that the ones that are really practicing this are actually living very happy, stable, joyful lives. They are way showers. They are exemplars of what's possible for everyone.
Yes. There are 2 questions. You mentioned law of attraction, you mentioned The Secret, and I'm happy that you mentioned it, because I could have saved years of guilt, of frustration, of self-judgment and conflict, trying to create everything that I wanted. I wanted everything that my ego wanted, my soulmate, my dream house in California. It's all possible. I mean, in America, it's all possible. It's all controllable. We just do that mind work and that 1 weekend course, and it's all possible. And because America is very vocal and very strong also, and they make it so believable, I would just think I'm a failure. I'm a complete mess up. I'm not working hard enough. So I work it harder. I do more. I'm even more stricter to myself. And the more it didn't go. So I attract nothing that I want. I get nothing that I want. My intuition just goes down the drain. I don't want to speak with God anymore because I don't get what I want. And then someone was also talking about Lila Land says, gosh, Jeanine, the best thing that could happen to you. And I was like, what? And I could see what he meant. But why I'm asking this, also when I listen a little bit to Sadhguru, because I'm very much into oneness and looking at the essence of different approaches. I love that, finding the essence. And people who follow somebody, they're always so obsessed of one direction. And I say, no. Let them all come together. Let you come together with Sadhguru, with Eckhart Tolle, with Dalai Lama, and see that the ones who are teaching it are in essence all the same, and they would completely allow each other's perceptions. Now, Sadhguru said, and in one of always in of end of his course, in his online course, so now go out and create the life you want. And I was, what? Here again, I'm running away from the law of attraction, and you say that again. And one of his students said, he says this so that people go for what they want very quickly, feeling the emptiness in what they want because they have not attuned with the higher self, with the God self or the intuition. So then they are open quicker to what really is coming. And that made sense to me. I thought, yes, because I always thought, how can the law of attraction and secret work? Because my ego doesn't know what I want. My ego is so small compared to Jesus, compared to whatever name you want to give it. Even if Jesus and God turns you off, you can say the nature of who you are. Yeah. How can we do, would you also agree that that is misleading, that it's still coming from a commercial ego perspective, from a perspective from wanting to control it? Because letting that go means I'm in no land. I don't know. That means every day I'm showing up to the unknown, which is a very brave thing to do. And this is not so easy to sell, or not so easy to get there. Is this just the next step after we get what we want?
Yeah, I think there has to be, you used that word at the beginning, allowance. If we have so many platitudes or so many beliefs about what's spiritually right and being spiritually correct, like people are concerned about being politically correct, spiritually correct, but if it's so tightly wound that you don't ever give yourself allowance to open up and explore, then you could fall into a lot of traps just by having blinders on and not even aware that you're wearing blinders. So I think the idea of being very open, I mean, that's, to me, the highest state of mind is open-mindedness, because it's non-judgmental and it's totally allowing and it's totally accepting, and there's no counterpoint. You're not trying to win a point. You're not trying to, you don't have an agenda. You just are very much like, let all things be exactly as they are, and you have full appreciation. But for people that feel like they're very much in a state of denial or repression, and they really are curious, sometimes it's good to play things out. And I do, some of the students I've worked with over the years, depending on where their level of awareness is and their readiness, but I had one friend one time who she came and she was working with me for a while, and then she came to me one like a weekday, a Friday or something, and she said, I still have this man that I met, and I just fantasize about flying off to where he is and just living out in nature with him and giving it a go, and it's really bothering me and everything. And I said, well, why don't you go spend the whole weekend, go in your mind, give yourself over, go fly there in your mind and play it all out, and fall in love and do whatever you need to do, get married and everything. Go for it, and just spend the whole weekend just giving yourself over to it. And so she did, and then Monday morning I just saw her, and I said, how did your adventure go with this guy? And she said, it didn't work out. But she did it in one weekend, because she did it mentally instead of doing it over like 7 or 8 years. And she fully allowed herself to kind of move through things in her mind very quickly. So there is something to the power of the mind and the willingness to see things and see the insights, get the lessons and work things out. For most people, there's such a strong belief in the external world that people are going to have to play out some fantasies, and they shouldn't be too harsh on themselves when they do this. They should almost more pat themselves on the back and say, okay, what did I learn from this? What did this show me? What am I grateful for? And be able to take something from it in a positive way instead of so harsh. I wasted time, I wasted my energy, you know, all those other things, because that doesn't bring any kind of fruitful awakening when we're too harsh on ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know, in Europe we can be extremely hard, and especially women. And I always, that's one of my mantras, and also give it further to women. Be gentle, be very soft with yourself, and choose compassion over judgment. And I'm learning this daily myself, and I still do give out what I want. But it was very sweet with this interview, because it was like in the moment decision. But it was like, you know, the momentum and what the whole week is very full. So I said, this is actually the whole week, it cannot happen. So I said out to also Jesus and my voice, okay, I'm going to fly out to Majorca. If I have a beautiful, sweet spot, I can pay it. I have my flight, and it just goes easy, gentle, easy, and deeply joyful. But I was not relying on it, because I knew we could have easily also a video Zoom. And my assistant said, why don't you just sit in your living room and have a nice video Zoom interview? Don't have all that hassle. And I felt like, no, I give it a try. And then, you know, she gave me an option, said, no. So I sit at the computer, and this beautiful Finca shows up, and this easy plane shows up, and everything works like in 2 hours, easy, deeply joyful, and gentle. And I think, yeah, then book it. And I'm so happy that I went. But I was, it was a different way of creation. My life didn't depend on it. So it was not, if I get that, if I don't see David, my life is ruined. I really left it open. I felt like in some way we're going to see each other or meet each other online or not. So I was very, very happy with that. Talking again about women when they are in the situation of wanting to be leaders or wanting to move forward, getting out of a situation, and talking, and I'm doing 40 plus women. So because with 40 plus you have had some disappointments, you have some experiences, life is not so rosy anymore. Your children are grown, so everything is a little bit more relative, but also a great chance to do things differently for the second half. Yes. So when you have been disappointed, or when you thought you had faith in something, and you say trust is very important and faith is very important. Now, trust doesn't come easy to me, because some hurdles have really hurt badly. So sometimes I think, why should it happen now when it didn't happen in the past? And then, that trust talk comes again. And some people just say, if you don't trust, you can forget about it. And but I'm learning it. I came here to learn it. So don't tell me if you don't trust, you can go home again. So when there are women completely open to your teachings and to many kind of different teachings where they meet in essence, but they feel, David, honestly, I do have a trust issue still. I really am working on what can they do now and in that moment, daily in their routine, to trust more, to trust that voice more, and feel that momentum that leads them into a different perception of the world.
Yeah, I would say that trust is a cornerstone. Trust is the foundation, but it also requires patience to develop. So
it doesn't make it easier.
It doesn't. It actually, it's one of those things where I feel like a perspective of development is so important, because we would love to have it, but it's something that has to be built up. And it's something I think that grows when we have experiences where we trust and we have a very helpful, loving experience. It builds the confidence in the trust. And then we have to keep building and building. And sometimes people have told me, well, my life is, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And why does it have to be so herky-jerky? But the fear is very deep in the mind. And so because of those, I call them ego backlashes or ego whiplashes, that when we have really wide, mind-opening experiences, or when our hearts fly open and we feel all this love, there's usually a backlash of some sort that comes in, because it's like the ego saying, not so fast. Like, don't think you're just going to just escaped me. I've had you for a millennium, and you're not just skipping town on me now. And so it takes a lot of time, and we go through these phases and periods where they could be disorienting, disjunctive. We can feel frustrated. We can feel like, why is this taking me so long? Or like you were saying, I've had these experiences in the past that were so dark that they come back into mind, and so I feel like it has to be nurtured. I always feel like trust is something that just has to be nurtured along, a lot of gentleness, a lot of allowance, a lot of spaciousness, and a lot of patience, that you really have to be patient in that, because if you stop off and you draw a conclusion, a dark conclusion or a negative conclusion, and that just puts a hold on the whole process of developing trust. Trust is still there, will still come, but it's definitely going into a holding pattern or a delay pattern when we really shut down. We draw some kind of conclusion and we tell ourselves
Story
this conclusion.
Comes up, yes.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't know what I was believing, but I do know that I really ended up with the Course, and I've tried a lot of different approaches, and I do still add different approaches, but my cornerstone is the Course, and it's just the solid base, and it's just my home, and it's so beautiful. But, and I'm saying this but, underlining, highlighting it, there's not a few weeks coming by that I'm not smashing it against the wall. I think I literally did once, like, just make it, just too abstract, my mind is hurting, I'm trying to get it, and or this holy instant, now, this holy instant, and I cannot hear anything, so I would really be in this now, or this shift can happen now, and I would feel like this failure again. Or say you mentioned sickness is a defense against the truth, and then I battle with migraines, so then I think you have it again, and you work already so committed, and then you have again a migraine, and why is it not working? So I think a lot of people struggle with that, and then they might take another commercial weekend course, and as you say, they might be very important to learn from. But I love that you're saying, look, Jeanine, there's a process, and there is an allowance, and there's a spaciousness, and there is patience, and these are the female qualities, and these are not very sexy. I mean, we're talking about goal, determination, action orienting, and I was raised up like a very masculine personality, and it saved actually my life becoming so masculine in my goal-driven ambition. It saved me from my childhood, but I had to go, like many women in that generation, I had to go back to pick up all the pieces that I'd lost becoming a woman, not from the outside, but from the inside. Trust, patience, accepting, allowing. And I know that my mentor said, you cannot even, I can hear you when you ask about patience. It's almost like a dirt word in your mouth. It's so horrible for you. And that's true, but then I could see the beauty and the love in really accepting. And I also could see you're not trapped there. You don't stay with acceptance for the rest of your life. Patience doesn't mean the end of your life. And I could see that, and suddenly I became very crazy and wild. Yeah, God, there's accepting again, and there's patience again. So I felt such joy with that, like a kid.
Yeah.
And I hope that with those interviews and with you teaching that and other wonderful teachers, that this becomes, the balance that brings it into balance again, not in the one side, as you said it beautiful in this example, but bring the conscious masculine, the conscious feminine into healing. We don't have a lot of time. We almost are finished with an hour, and I don't want to extend too much of your time, but I do want at least 2 or 3 questions, if it's okay with you. The pretty woman side, the old pretty woman questions, the awakening women in relationships. I touched already a little bit on it with my partner and with my ex-husband. Well, now he got very far, and I see a lot of women who are hurting because they're single, they're awakening, they do amazing work, very committed, but then they don't find their equal. They're in the generation of around 40, 50. There's a new generation coming where men seem to be way more open to talking about their feelings, doing environmental projects, self-employed, rebellious against, the ambitious, precious, fear-driven companies. So there is a new wave coming. And yet still, they don't seem to do the inner work so much as women seem to do it or seem to say it. So women perceive, a lot of women, including myself, perceived it as a misbalance. And Eckhart Tolle said also, well, yes, and Kabbalah said that men do need to have more work, and Kabbalah talks about the light, to go into the light. So they are supported more. Eckhart Tolle said, yes, it's true, women are further evolved when it's coming to consciousness. And I thought at one point I was divorced and I was alone by myself for 7.5 years, and I met men, but I wanted a conscious man. So I found it so unfair. Now I'm doing all the work, I'm so committed, now I'm divorced, and I'm self-employed, I'm in a male-dominant system, and then on top of it I'm not meeting a conscious man, and then, and I felt that many women have that. Now, is this just our perception, our crazy perception? Would you say have a whole different perception, Jeanine? There are so many conscious women in that generation out there. Or is this truth? Or is this craziness? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm completely confused around this.
Well, I do think in terms of the relative world, as I've traveled the world and met so many people in many different continents and many different countries, when I show up and do a gathering, I just don't do men's retreats and women's retreats, so everyone's welcome to come, but mostly women come. And it depends on what part of the world I'm in, but the percentages can climb up into the 90s at my gatherings. They're just enlightenment gatherings, but like in South America, I go to Argentina, maybe 80-90% women, in Colombia, certain places where there's seemingly harsh conditions that just seem to be the incubator, because people have to face the darkness in a faster rate. And then I did notice as I was traveling around these seeming imbalances. And the thing about consciousness, it doesn't see any race, creed, color, or gender. When you are awakening, as you have a deep desire to awaken, you will just draw forth the witnesses and the symbols that you need to keep expanding. And what you're talking about is a very common question, but it still all comes back to like nurturing and continuing to nurture what works and what's developing. And then the ones will show up, sometimes very unexpectedly, where they show up and you feel more of a sense like, Jesus even has one part of the course where he calls it the teaching-learning balance is actually perfect. It's the third level of teaching, where you're given a lifelong partner where the teaching-learning balance is actually perfect. And if they decide to learn it, the perfect lesson is before them and can be learned. That's coming straight from Jesus, from the Manual for Teachers.
Yes.
Now, to move towards that, it's almost like doing your homework, doing your inner work, and keeping the faith. And admittedly, lots of things will seem to fall away. When I knew I was going to be doing this interview with you, I could just feel, my last name is Hofmeister, but I could feel you were in Germany. And it was kind of fascinating because the way that it got scheduled now to doing it right now is coming up this weekend is a big, large Course in Miracles festival in Germany.
Really?
That some of my friends are doing, and I thought, oh, how fascinating. You're coming at this time, and then this weekend there's this big festival. A friend of mine made a Course in Miracles movie and interviewed me for it in Holland. And
I'm Dutch.
Yes, and you're Dutch. And if somebody had asked me, out of all the countries you've been to, including America and all the countries in the world, what's the one country that comes to mind in terms of spiritual awakening and where it's just lighting up like firecrackers in your awareness? And I would say the Netherlands, Holland, out of all of them.
Yes.
And it's so amazing because I'm at the end of in October, like 7th to 13th, I'm doing a week-long retreat up there at a castle, and there's like people are aside. We may end up with hundreds of people for the whole week. It may turn into this kind of a festival, because whatever it is being orchestrated. So I like to see how, in answer to your question, we come, Spirit brings us around, back to the core, back to our roots, back to what this is all about, and using the symbols of the world that we can really relate to. It's almost like getting kissed by the Spirit, because you can't miss these signs and symbols. They're all around us, and that's important. We do need those symbols so we can go, oh, that's sweet, thank you.
It is so funny that you say this, because I had Barlow on my list, with a few other programs, and they all fall into the same season. And I said, okay, I cannot do all. And I said, I'm waiting until we have that interview, and I'm waiting if it makes click or sign. And if I feel a click or sign, then I know I'm going to Barlow. And when you just said, that where it's fireworks are getting up, it's Holland. Before you mentioned Barlow, I said, okay, that's a sign. It's decided. I'm coming to Barlow. That is so I'm going to see you again in a few months, which is awesome. And you said it so beautifully. And as I said, in my whole awakening process, battling with all the ego stuff that is thrown at you, I know that at one point I was very stubborn when I thought, like, okay, even in my community, spiritual community, Course in Miracles, there are 2,188 women and I think 10 men or 12 men. I said, here we have it again. And then I said to God, so I'm getting a lesbian. So then, way more women are there. And my girlfriends would say, are you a lesbian? I said, no. And I looked at me, so how? I said, don't forget about the sex. I want to have a conscious relationship. Everything else will fall into place. So these were my less conscious friends, my dancer friends. But they would always look at me, are you sure? Yeah, I'm absolutely sure. I'm into the human being, into the consciousness. And it gave me some kind of relief. But you are so right when you say it's about the learning, teaching. Teaching, learning, balance. So as the last question, so if you're single and if you just left your husband, or if you are, a single mother and you feel struggling with the challenges of being a single mother, and, your partner maybe has a new wife and all the hurts that come up with that. So what you're saying is keep doing your inner work. You never know what the form is coming. Keep being patient and gentle and soft with yourself. There is a form that shows up for you if you're not going to the form, but keep your inner work.
Yes.
And then, sorry.
That's it. That's exactly it.
And then, I should have known that when I was single. But I learned from David Hoffmeister today, that there's, experiences, so be gentle with yourself. 7.5 years. And then for women, some women are in long-term relationships and they have been moving forward, and they are in their 50s or in the end of 40s or end of 50s. And I see with my friends, and this is why I love to work with women so much, or also why I feel they're pushed. They want to move forward, they do other things, they go to workshops like yours. So they feel they want to expand. And I see a lot of men in their age, and men are happy when they're at home. They say, yeah, do go to your workshop. But then they want to drag their husband along. And sometimes they're lucky and sometimes not. Then they're very focused on their kids, or they're very focused on artistic work or on spiritual work, but mostly they do it by themselves. Either they have made peace with that and they go along as teams, but somehow the liveliness of a relationship has died. Or they still have hope that their teammate and their soulmate or their partner may come with them. What do you say to them? Would you say keep your inner work? And Eckhart Tolle said, if it's obvious, you will also be able to part in love. So you don't have to stick or be afraid that you're stuck with it for the rest of your life, but you don't have to force separation if you feel you have to go, or if you don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes back, like Eckhart talks a lot about the present moment, and so do I. This moment is your miracle, in the sense that we have an unconscious mind, and that mind is going to project out a linear perception of our identity, even though our identity is truly eternal. And then with this linear projection of an identity, we have future goals for fulfillment. Maybe it's we believe we need children or a successful career or a long-term partnership, or it could be a number of things and combinations of things, and those are still very much related to time, and there's a lot of expectations. So I would say the hurts come when the expectations are not met, when the form doesn't look the way we would like it to. We think the inner picture is not the same as the outer picture, and we're struggling. Where I feel like if you really do the inner work and you have that trust, you will say to the Spirit, let the form be whatever it takes to teach me the lesson that I want to learn. And we're opening to present peace, we're at present happiness, present joy. All of us came with this kind of sense of having to develop a self-concept and a work in progress, and you have to fulfill all these things and achieve and accomplish things in the future to be fulfilled and to be happy. And what we're discovering is it's part of a big trick. It's a massive trick, keeping us away from inner guidance, inner listening, and inner contentment. So I've had those things happen over the years where I've seen things fall away, things end that I thought were going to be continuous or that would be lasting, and yet it's built the trust stronger and stronger, and the contentment to be here now stronger and stronger. And yet it's like a mesmerism, it's like a big trick that you look around and you see other people seem to be chasing things too.
Seem to be so happy
and
sometimes.
They seem to be happy,
so
right? And that's a big trick, because then you
missing
think,
out on something.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. And so that's what I mean by how sneaky it is. But I think if you continue with the inner work and you just trust, everything I need is going to come my way.
Yes.
And it's going to fulfill this inner purpose that I have, this inner calling. When you really trust in that, you actually start to see it happening. And that is the most delicious thing when that happens.
Ah, that's such a... You should see David's eyes right now. I mean, I just can it was anyway hard sometimes to look at you, because one can get so lost in your eyes. It's an ocean of the soul that I can see in you. And it was like, focus, Jeanine, focus. So let me complete this wonderful, juicy interview talk with a little short paragraph also on relationships that's in your book. And I really highly recommend, as you see, I'm really working it.
Yeah.
And I love to make my notes and stuff and questions and stuff. And sometimes I just take, a page and then I put it away again. So it's part of my spiritual routine. And for me, sometimes I feel rather doing a workbook lesson, I do a few pages of your book. So when you do, that's what I tell the listeners, when you do your spiritual routine, you don't have to make it so rigid. Just have a few kind of books and pages, and you also have a wonderful Spirit TV app that I sometimes use. Or I do a film, so I have a whole playground and toolbox that keeps it so vivid and so alive. And I started to allow myself to go with that flow. And there is a paragraph in the end of the Blessings of Relationship that says, so this is a quote of David, "It's therefore beneficial to stay open and honor the relationships that come your way, however they might look initially. And as you learn to use them in truly helpful ways, they will allow you to heal, let go of specialness, and lead you back to God." I really love that. So thank you so much for that awesome interview. It was so worth coming.
Yeah, we are here honoring each other. It
was so worth coming.
Feeling we're just blessed by coming together. It feels beautiful.
Hallelujah. So let's keep touching souls and let's keep going home.
Yes.
This was a piece of home today.
Yes.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
See you back in Barlow.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good.